I have time to tell a few stories, not many, and then I'll leave. I'm not going to tell you and applaud how hard you worked. It's a privilege to go to school. It's not a big deal. It's really wonderful between your parents and yourselves. Even if you owe money, it's really nice to be able to go to school. I mean, really nice. It's a wonderful time in your life. My life began when I went to Penn, and when I met two professors in particular, that just changed my life. So it's really a special time today. I hope you have an interesting life. I get called by young people and middle-aged people 60 and above, and they want to know the secret, and those are boring conversations. So I say that today was interesting, and I hope tomorrow is interesting also. Have an interesting life. And that's about it. Not necessarily a happy life, but an interesting life, just filled with curiosity. I'm going to tell you, I'm writing my last book, a big one. It's a very, very big book. You'll never see it. I mean, it'll be out a year from now, but it's not something that's going to be popular, probably, although it has a lot of pictures. And it's called Worship the God of Understanding. And this is the opening few sentences. I just got off the plane in London Heathrow, jet-lagged. And as I came into the city and stepped off the curb, I looked the wrong way and was almost hit by a bus. And I realized that the bus is about the size of a blue whale's tongue. But then I'm exaggerating because it was a double-decker bus. As the bus came to a screeching stop, it got hit in its rear by a Volkswagen Beetle, which is the size of a blue whale's heart, and was Hitler's people's car, first built in 1935, the year I was born. And that's the opening of the book. It's a made-up story. It didn't happen. But it connects to several of the ways we understand things. And it basically gives me permission, you permission, the reader permission, and all my guests, authors, permission to understand things in different ways. We understand things by exaggeration. Everything we say isn't precise and exact. If I tell you a football field is 43,560 square feet, you'll forget it. If I exaggerate or not tell the exact truth and tell you that a football field is about the size of an acre, then you know what an acre is. I start with whales, and the first chapter is about whales. There's 40-some different kinds of whales and 67 or so sub-collections of whales. And the whales in Moby Dick was the sperm whale, but it didn't have sperm. It had something called spermous. It was an oil in its head, and its head is 1/3 the size of its body. And think of the person sitting next to you if their head was 1/3 the size of their body. No, now think of any other animal that you know, your dog. Think of a giraffe. Think of other things that they're the sperm whale's head is 1/3 the size of its body, and its brain is 5 times the size of yours, and yet it's not necessarily the smartest creature on earth. And in its second stomach, it has bad digestion. Sometimes they find up to 10,000 beaks of octopus that it eats. And they have a little beak on them, and it irritates the stomach. And they believe it starts the growth of ambergris. Ambergris, lighter than water, more expensive than gold per ounce, is the basis of the most expensive perfumes on earth. The journey, you can go with anything. If you start looking at the perfume culture and the history of perfume in the world, there's a whole journey. And my life is just that journey of being interested in things. I asked the president why I was here. She came to see me, and I asked her that same question. And today I asked her more specifically, well, how did you find me? Well, your name came up. There's a series of committees, and it came up. And then we did some research, and I said, you Googled me, right? She said, yeah. Now, there was a guy by the name of Charles Wilson, common name, who in 1912, one of the great physicists of all times, in 1912, he invented the cloud chamber, one of the things that would make him one of the 100 great physicists of the 20th century. He does not make it on that list because when you Google him, when you search him, it's such a common name that it's struck off the list. Our technology has struck Charles Wilson off the list of greatest scientists. Thank God my name is Richard Saul Wurman. Well, that might seem trivial. It really isn't. It's how do we transform big data, which is rather impersonal, into big understanding. It's not just big data in itself. Steve Wright is a funny comedian, and he has one of his one-liners is, everything is in walking distance if you have enough time. Well, that's rather profound if you were a planner. You could have a whole course on that one joke of what is walking distance. Where do you walk? You walk in New York on Madison Avenue, Fifth Avenue. You walk about a foot in LA. Different places you walk, other places you don't walk. What's interesting on the ground level is where you walk. When people build buildings right down to the street and there's nothing going on the ground floor, it's not interesting and you don't walk. You walk because of the weather, because of safety. Nothing is simple. And the journey to find out the reasons for things are what interests me. Now I have a proposal that you won't, I have two proposals, and I think my time is sort of up. One proposal is that to get here along the way, many of you took a test called the ACT or the SAT, and they have respectively 215 and 170 questions in each one. I think somebody should take as their project, not in this room, but maybe it'll filter to the undergraduate program or filter to some other people, an entrepreneurial act to change those two tests into 170 questions, not answers, that you come up with the questions. You are graded on the quality of your question. I give a lot of speeches, and I don't take questions because half the questions are speeches and the other half are bad questions. It's not easy asking a good question. And it's really more the measure of you and your life, not putting up your hand and answering a question or going uh-huh to each other when you don't understand each other, or how's everything going, keeping busy, all implicit with lies, all those things. Those aren't good questions. How's everything going is impossible, of course, to answer because that's an infinite question. So think about the quality of what you do next based on the quality of your questions. How many of you speak on the phone well? How many people, when they get up to somebody, really know how to engage by asking a question and listening? Listening. And I think you could make up an incredible test with questions. Most things are solved by the opposite of stuff. Niels Bohr, another physicist, one of the great physicists, he made it on the list because his name was strange. He said when he had a profound thought, he realized the opposite was also profound. Last week, somebody came to my office and was interviewing me and wanted to know what I thought the greatest discoveries of the 20th century was, I forget which he asked. And I had never been asked that, but I answered right away. And I said the discovery by Bob Ballard in 1997 of the black smokers in the Pacific, where they showed that life can come from, and even maybe more life on Earth, comes from chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. A complete opposite of everything we were taught when we were young, that everything and all life comes from the sun. And that, in the flip of all our scientific knowledge, to me, was a great release for me in how I looked at things. My next charge is not to you, it's to the president. This is a very long ceremony. She's been doing it all day. Some other people have been doing it all day. You're going to march up here. It's going to take forever and shake hands. You wear these robes and you think, well, it's nice because it's tradition. You don't know what they mean, and they're different colors, and you think if they're fancy colors, they're smarter or something. And if the hats are soft, they're something special. Maybe they're from England. And then she's going to have to shake every one of your hands. In an era where you're only supposed to hit elbows because of Ebola. So I would like to say that this is an entrepreneurial project that could make somebody a lot of money. Redesign graduation. I know you're chuckling, I see the smiles, but think of the business. If you redesigned it in a way that was really thoughtful, that made people feel personal about graduation, where you somehow in your head thought you were shaking somebody's hand, where you feel the camaraderie and the spirit and the throwing of the hats and the wearing of the robes and the music playing, and running through the rain if it's a rainy day, or sweating like hell if it's too hot. Think of what it would be if you invented a different way of graduating that had all those attributes. You didn't lose anything, and you actually gained some things. There's a business. There's a lot of college graduations. You could sell it. You could give it away. Thank you very much. I'm really honored.